Hey there, folks. Mark, aka DJ Solitaire here. And this is going to be the first in what I expect will be a series of videos exploring some of the musical richness of the Goa trance, psychedelic trance scene, specifically going back to tracks in the 90s and checking out what it was about those tracks that made them so special. Now, when I got into the scene in 1994 in Tokyo, I think nobody could have been more surprised than I was at how taken by this music I was, considering I was coming at this from a classical music background. I was heavily active and still am in the classical music scene, very focused on a very specific subset of piano music and then specifically of historical recordings, which makes, again, my interest in looking back to what made music so great in the past and how we can have that in the present quite interesting in this scene as well. So very similar focus. Uh, but I certainly didn't expect, wandering into this club with some friends in Tokyo in October 1994, that I would somehow have my head blasted into another dimension, my whole being sort of thrown into a parallel universe where all of a sudden how sound was processed, how it was disseminated, how it was organized, uh, actually was so radically different, and yet I think also had very strong ties to what I think all of the great classical composers were trying to do. They all were using the best instruments they had at their disposal, and the way music was performed was again within how what the cultural norms were and what was possible socio-culturally and economically at the time. And so all of a sudden I realized, I've been thinking for a while that, classical music is kind of dead in the sense of, none of the new music really sounds great. Nobody wants to sit and listen to this stuff. And then, here I am in this dance floor thinking, okay, this actually starts to make more sense and ties in with what a 20th century composer, Paul Hindemith, had called Gebrauchsmusik, which is music to be used. And, if you're not just sitting back passively listening, but you're actually dancing and moving around and interacting with a space, uh, you're using the music in a very different way. And my instant impression of this music was that this is, if life existed on other planets, would they listen, congregate together and move themselves physically, if physical things actually existed, to vibrations of sound and, and express and move and interact with these vibrations of sound and light. So this all just came to me and I was absolutely hooked. Now, Ollie was the DJ that night. This is back when he only DJ'd and wasn't just doing live sets and playing his own music. And he later said that, it's like once you're bitten by the bug, you just it's in you. You've got it, and there's no getting away from it. And that's still very much how I feel. So there's some music that I still remember incredibly clearly from back then. Now, not from that particular party, because it was all so new. I have no idea what the heck I was listening to. Can sort of retroactively put pieces together in terms of what was around at the time and what kinds of sounds I heard, but I don't really know what I was listening to. But there are some tracks that stand out from, as my ears started getting accustomed to the music, as I started buying some myself and hearing others play it for me. And what I would like to do is present some of my favorite tracks from the period and do kind of a reaction video in a sense of we'll listen along and I'll point out what it is that stands out to me and what it is that, from my classical brain and also just from my DJ and dancer brain, which are very much the same brain, uh, and just point out what it is that I like, what it is that I observe. And then at the end of the video, I'll just put the whole track so you can listen to it without me blabbering over it. So the track that I would like to start off with isn't one that I heard in my first few months, but it probably, definitely within my first year. I had heard this track. So this is Stellium by Rhythmystec. I remember specific instances, one specific instance where this track was played, and this was the autumn equinox outdoor party that Tokyo Techno Tribe, their equinox party outfit that they had thrown around the third weekend of September in 1995. So it was around the autumn equinox. And it was this incredible party outdoors in the forest on a mountain. There was this circular forest clearing. And I knew this track from before that time because this was one that I'd heard at a couple of parties and had been with a friend at one point. And we were like, oh my God, this track, this is it. This is like the track. And I specifically remember Cooney, the DJ from Equinox, playing this probably around 3 in the morning, which I think is like perfect time to play it. And seeing my friend Pete on the dance floor afterwards, and we were both like, we ran up to each other and said, "Did you hear it? He played it." And we knew what we meant. Like, didn't know the track name, didn't know who had produced it. Again, things were very, very different back then. There wasn't that whole association with project names and that kind of thing that there is now. You never saw a flyer with the DJ's photo on it. I mean, everything was just, you were there and you were immersed in the sound. So we both recognized, oh yeah, it's that track, we recognized it. And there is so much going on in this track. It is, for me, one of the most perfectly structured tracks in so many ways, and in actually quite a metaphysical way, which we'll be talking about. It was actually around January 97 when I first got my hands on this one. I didn't know where to find it. It wasn't on any of the CDs I bought. I wasn't playing vinyl. And it was over at Mark Neal's place in London after I'd moved there. And, he was letting me transfer his vinyls onto DAT. And this one was there, released on Mitsuri sometime in 95. So as for the name, first of all, Rhythmystec is a project with Nick Taylor, who had been in Prana, and Ray Castle. And Ray Castle had actually been somebody who had been in the Goa scene since actually before it became what we know, most certainly. And he was helping coach, in a way, the Equinox folks on throwing parties and setting things up. And so it was a really Goa vibe at those parties. It wasn't everything about the vibe that I loved about it. That's a topic for another time. It was very loud. And there's a few sort of energetic elements I didn't quite like as much, but amazing vibe still, and great music. And Cooney was one who, his mixing, he was very orchestral with his mixing, very spacious with his mixing, not at all this whole beat focus thing. He played exclusively off of DAT. And that's something we'll talk about, because how this track is structured is perfect for this. So that's Rhythmystec, Nick and Ray. And the track Stellium is the first one they produced. They only produced 5 tracks together. Ray told me that Stellium is the first one. And a stellium is an astrological term for when there are 3 planets in somebody's chart, in a house, or in a specific sign. And that happens at different periods that we're in. And right now, actually, in late December, what year are we? 2022? We're actually in a stellium right now. So 3 or more planets gathered together, which is kind of cool, because if you think about a party, it's kind of like, 3 or more people together can really make a party. And musically, what's going on in this track, once you reach the apex of this track, there's 3 or more musical elements going on simultaneously. And this is one of the things that struck me musically when I first started hearing this stuff, and especially at that party that Ollie had played at, that October 94 party, was the counterpoint, the polyphony, the fact that it's not just a melody with other stuff. There's actually, you can hear these patterns all happening simultaneously. And I think this is one of the most successful tracks in terms of the complexity, the character, and the variety of the different melodic stems, you might call it in musical terms now, but you know, the musical subjects or the motifs. We're going to talk sort of classical. So how about I put on the track? I'll talk a little bit through it. The reason I'm using this is I tested it out. The only way for my voice to be able to be heard together with the music is if I have a microphone that's further away from the speakers. So that's how it has to happen. So I am going to start this beautiful, beautiful track. And just this gorgeous, spacey introduction with that lovely, spacey, and sort of like this chorus of celestial angels, cosmic intergalactic beings. And I love those beeps. And beautiful, beautiful bass line, of course, very different than anything we hear now. It's not complex, but it delivers some clarity, some oomph. And I love that there's this bounce to this, because actually I find it's quite a serious track in a way, but this bounce almost offsets it. Now, what you're going to hear in this introduction is all these bits and pieces of those stems or those motifs that you're going to hear later on. So just this repeated pattern is part of that. That one too. It's kind of like all starting to build in, like just getting familiar with the scenery, the sort of auditory scenery. Getting a little variation there on the bass, just foreshadowing what's coming. And now this voice. So now it just turns into this celebratory, cosmic, intergalactic circus. So it's like this real gathering and celebration. I mean, it's really like a cosmic carnival. And that interval, you used to hear a minor third interval a lot in music at the time, and we need to bring it back for reasons we'll talk about later. And then that just starts to move into this spacey sound. Notice what happens here. And then that morphs into that melodic content and then just continues. And there's some beautiful mystical harmony with just a gorgeous pattern, really fluid. And then this spacey sound here. And again, this is actually the only content we're having that's kind of some of the complete stuff we're going to hear later on. It's still, the other voices we're hearing are chopped up bits of what's coming. Like, da-da-da-da. All of that's just a chopped up part of some content that's coming. And this kind of cosmic, celebratory, semi-guitar riff. And that's just part of what's coming too. And then this pause. Just paving the way for what's coming. So it's like building for this major riff. So it's like you have this pattern that contains some information almost. So it's like this algorithm or this kind of quantum equation that just sort of zaps you with some information. So it's like, this is where on the dance floor, under the stars, you don't feel like you're listening to music. It's really like you're just being beamed down with these messages. And there's these celestial beings squealing and squelching in delight or whatever emotion. And then that riff comes in. Like the interplay between these is just perfect. So you hear that main guitar one, and then the other one comes out of it. Then we have that celebratory sort of exclamatory expression of, again, that sort of semi-guitar kind of riff. And now we're sort of in this open space, and it's really like you're drifting through space. And just all these little sounds in parts, all things that we've heard in pieces beforehand. We're navigating this sonic and physical sort of unified space. I love that kind of oral voice in the background. Just like all of these pieces just threading through like this really complex tapestry. And it's all building up to this motif that's like a variation of something that we heard before. And here it comes. And it's like, this is the apex of the track. Like everything's been building up to this motif that's like the message of the track. It's like this alien encoded harmonic pattern that's meant to remind you, wake you up, reawaken something. And now they all start coming together. So there's that chorus. Followed by that pattern. Sounds like this kind of Egyptian Pleiadian extraterrestrial harmonic code. And now that guitar. Not really a guitar, but you know, this kind of electro thunderbolt. And then that exclamatory thing. Just listen to how many levels are happening. Again, this is like a musical stellium, all these different planetary themes and messages coexisting. And we get that whoosh again. And then the track starts to just unwind. And this is not where you're going to beat mix something else in and start bringing in a kick. I mean, this is all part of the denouement, the sort of unraveling and unwinding. So this is where there would be some other kind of harmonic cloud or ambient part of another track would come in. And then it just bounces and fades away. So, you know, the way my friends and I reacted to that whole, oh my God, he played it. This is where like the track is not just a track. It's like an event, it's an experience. And where there's something, you know, dare I say sacred, sacramental, ceremonial about the presentation of this track. Like there's this whole incredible energy inside the music that gets released when it's played. And it's not just like you just put it on because you feel like it. And it just really has to be the right time and place. And that was the sense that we had about those events and how the music was being made, and then also how the music was being delivered. And at the right parties, that's what was going on. It was just this sense of alignment. And so, you know, this for me is a track that gets played, if I'm going to play it generally, it's going to be a nighttime set. And depending on what's going on in the flow of the party and where things are, 1, 2, 3 in the morning, it's not for me a daytime track. I mean, you probably can. It might just be, again, my relationship with it, my programming. But, you know, if we think thematically that this is, you know, it's about planets and it's about stars, you know, it sure makes a difference when you're outside and you can see them. But it's got that, there's that incredible combination of uplifting and celebratory, but also some depth to it. Not dark per se. One of these days we'll talk about sort of how, you know, the music started getting dark without the depth, and how I think that was part of the unraveling of our scene. But we've just got this incredible depth, very outer spacey, very earthy with that bounce, sort of grounding and keeps you moving. But this incredible combination of sounds with that sort of cyber electric thunderbolt guitar, those bouncy elements, those squeals, this sort of really cyber synthy sounds, and then that hypnotic Pleiadian, not the project, but just it's similar to the music in a way. That otherworldly minor key harmonic evocative riff that transforms from how it's presented initially into that key point in the climax. So, when we were listening to this stuff in 94 and 95, the internet wasn't a thing. There was no term for downloading or uploading or anything like that. But it is absolutely, that was our experience of it. And that was, in a sense, we talked about it in those terms, even though we weren't using those exact words. That it was like this experience of being outdoors under the stars with this, this DJ booth that looked like this control tower, where it was like, you were tuning in and they were beaming down some messages, tuning into some frequency from another planet, and that was delivering some messages, and it was like all just quantum information, like computer programming. And there was impact on our consciousness like that. And they were really good parties. And so this is why, this music with that level of complexity, I think, really from what I gather, what I've observed, what I think, and what I've gathered from speaking with a lot of these musicians, there was the experimentation and creativity that was happening in the studio. There was also that belief and that emotional connection, that spiritual engagement with a mission of what it was that they were doing. And I think all of those levels happening, and that creativity where, they're twiddling knobs and experimenting, as something happens. Who knows on what level they were downloading something from beyond their consciousness. Or they were just really beautifully tuning into theirs and to their higher level of creativity and consciousness. And that is the energy that I think is still in these tracks. That's beyond just the notes and the recording and the instruments and whatever the sound quality is. Like, there's a whole energy in there. And I think we revisit that each time we hear it. Now, on a personal level, of course, the more times you've heard a track, it's less new for you. So your nervous system has this relationship with it, which is, not the same as hearing it for the first time. But for me, there are certain tracks that always give me a rush, give me a hit, give me a sort of a boost. And this is definitely one of them. And that's my idea for this series, is to choose some of those favorites, those tracks that really have a lot of meaning for me, that I think musically and in terms of the story, in terms of the musical content, really have a level of complexity and depth that I think rivals and supersedes a lot of what's being produced today. So that's it from me, DJ Solitaire here. Hope you've enjoyed this. Leave a comment below. What I'm going to do, I'm going to fade out and present the whole track so that you can listen to it uninterrupted. And I hope that you will enjoy this as much as I always do when I hear this track. Over and out for now. See you again soon.